Hey, how you doing? This is part two of my predictions. I left off at Matt Hughes versus Ricardo Almeida. We're gonna pick up at Roy Nelson versus Junior Cigano dos Anjos. Roy Nelson, 6 feet tall, 263 pounds, record of 16-4-0 against Dos Anjos, who is Dos Santos, who's 6'4", 238 pounds with a record of 11-1. Um, Roy Nelson, probably the most underrated heavyweight in the UFC right now. Probably the most underrated as far as skills, key victories, and even overall ability. Dos Anjos, one of the more overrated competitors. We haven't really seen much from Dos Anjos except for him beating an unmotivated Crow Cop and out of shape Fabricio Verdum. Horrible game plan by Gabriel Gonzaga. And his only real legit win, and doesn't have legit wins either. He beat a young Stefan Struve, and he beat a very wild and overrated Hurricane Gilbert Ivel. I really can't give Dos Anjos any real legitimate wins since being in the UFC. I still consider the guy very overrated. I'm a fan, but I think he's overrated. We haven't seen much from him yet. Roy Nelson, on the other hand, I wasn't a fan of Roy Nelson at first, but he's kind of won me over since Ultimate Fighter 10. Roy Nelson's big country. He's a good fighter. A good all-around fighter. Great on the ground, world-class jiu-jitsu that's respected by everyone. Heavy hands, as we've seen. He knocked out Stefan Struve and I think it was Brennan Schaub. Yeah, Brennan Schaub at the Ultimate Fighter 10 finale. Both these are first round, I think, knockouts. Both these are heavy-handed knockouts, and both these are. Now, as referee, when it came in, the guy would have probably been unconscious. With that being said, key loss for Roy Nelson was against Andrei Arlovsky, a fight that I think he was winning. He was going for a Kimura and side control, and referee stood him up for some reason. Probably stuff with Elite XC wanting to promote their own fighters over IFL champion like Roy Nelson. A very bad call, even a weird call to this day. And I think if that wouldn't have happened, Nelson would have put Arlovsky away. With that being said, if Roy Nelson gets this fight to the ground, which is where he needs to get it, he would have put Dos Anjos away. Probably won't take too long, but either ground and pound by the crucifix that he likes to work, or by a submission of his choice. Junior Dos Santos, he's said to have a legitimate black belt under the Nogueira belt. He's said to be a beast on the ground even before his boxing came into play. But we haven't seen it. He has one loss by submission, which is kind of sketchy. We haven't seen too much of his ground game. In any of his fights, we've only really seen him standing up. We've seen that he doesn't want to go to the ground. As when he fought Gonzaga, he sprawled, won't keep the fight on the feet, which leads me to think maybe his ground game isn't as top notch as they are saying. And I believe that if Nelson gets the fight to the ground, Nelson can win. That being said, standing, Nelson is at a big disadvantage, maybe. But his boxing's underrated. I can see Nelson putting Dos Anjos away in this fight on the feet too. Dos Santos is one I want to keep the fight on the feet. He has look at his record real quick. I think most of his wins I think all of his wins in the UFC are by knockout, besides the Crow Cop fight, I believe. Hold on. Yeah, his wins in the UFC are all by knockout or TKO. Even the fight with Crow Cop is considered as a knockout. It wasn't really a decision. But his records has come to the UFC's Verdum knockout in the first round. Stefan Struve knockout in the first round. Crow Cop submission, rather. It's listed as a submission win. Crow Cop gave up in the third round. Ivel by TKO in the first round. And recently, Gabriel Gonzaga at UFC Vera versus Jones in the first round. He's been very active, very dominant. He's looked pretty much invincible since coming to the UFC. But also, with that being said, I'm not so much sold on Junior Dos Santos' ability. I'm not sold on anything he's done yet. And I think he may be exposed by Roy Nelson. I wouldn't be surprised if Roy Nelson gets KO'd in the first round by Dos Santos. He has heavy hands, very precision point striker. He trains with Anderson Silva and Machida with the striking. Not to mention the Nogueira brothers too. That's a pretty amazing camp to be training with. But I'm picking Roy Nelson in this fight by submission or ground and pound in the first round, where Nelson's going to be the strongest. Also, another issue may be Dos Santos' cardio. We haven't seen Dos Santos push a long pace. The fight with Crow Cop was not a heavy paced fight. It was mainly Dos Santos picking apart Crow Cop. Roy Nelson, we've seen he has good cardio. He can go a while. He's very deceptive with their body type. You think he's not an in shape guy, but he is. He's a top world class athlete in my opinion. Roy Nelson by TKO. Sometime between the first and second round. Thiago Alves versus Tim Bostich. It's kind of a waste of a fight. Thiago Silva rather versus Tim Bostich. Thiago Silva by whatever he wants. Dustin Hazlett versus Rick Story. I'm gonna pick Dustin Hazlett. Struve versus Christian Moorcraft. I'm going to pick Struve. Johnny Hendricks versus Charlie Brenman. Hendricks, I'm liking him. Ben Saunders versus Dennis Hallman. This fight should be on a Spike TV telecast. I like Ben Saunders and I like Dennis Hallman. He's a Superman Hallman, but I think Dennis Hallman's on a downslide in his career. Ben Saunders is just too big and too tall and too long. Uh, Ben Saunders is going to put away Dennis Hallman. That's my predictions for UFC 117 Sue versus Sonnen. Leave comments what do you think about it, and see you on Fight Night.